yield to the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Fudge, for sponsoring this hour. I think it's extremely important to educate our constituencies to a greater extent than we are somehow able to do in 1 minute or even in the heat of a debate. Mr. Speaker, I'm so delighted again to join these distinguished colleagues, the chair of the special hour, Congresswoman Fudge, as well as our dean, I guess, of foreign affairs in the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Payne, and certainly I would like to associate myself with the comments of our dear representative from Maryland. I would like to associate myself with her remarks because I also want to talk about Liberia, but I want to talk about it from the perspective of protecting the investments that we have made in Liberia. Liberia's relationship to the United States is certainly long-standing. Liberia was settled in the early 1800s by free-born blacks and former slaves from the United States of America. These settlers used the Constitution of the United States as the model for their new government. They designed a flag with red and white stripes with a single white star. And of course, in 1824, the settlement was named Monrovia after the American President James Monroe. And Monrovia remains the capital of a modern-day Liberia. I can tell you that, unfortunately, because of arbitrary rule, economic collapse, corrupt governments, Liberia fell into two devastating civil wars in the span of a little more than a decade, as well as a legacy of a ruthless and reckless leader in Charles Taylor, who nearly destroyed the country, created regional instability, drawing in Sierra Leone, another country, and really creating an insecure situation. The most egregious of those things, in my mind, Congresswoman Fudge, was the engagement of children warriors in this fight. During that fighting, Liberians suffered immensely. Over 250,000 lives were lost, and more than half of all of Liberia's 3.5 million people were driven from their homes, including those who found safe haven in our country to escape the violence. Now, I've visited Liberia a couple of times and heard some of the stories of people, women who were crossing the roads and found them pregnant and found themselves killed on the road right there for their food. I looked into the vacant eyes of some of the child combatants that they are trying to rehabilitate in the country. And so I was really pleased when late last week, our President, Barack Obama, given all of the challenges that he has, stopped to allow Liberians who took refuge in our country from the Civil War in their home nation to receive deferred enforced departure protection for 12 more months. The President's recent order is so important because Liberians who have been granted either this temporary protective status, TPS, or deferred enforcement departure, DED, are allowed to remain in the U.S. rather than be forced to return to a country in the midst of war. And let us not think for one moment, Congresswoman Fudge, that this country is not still at war. And they are still at war because despite the sage leadership of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, she is taking tremendous steps to overcome the ravages of war. She is basically having to start from scratch from the destruction that was caused by these two wars. She's been busy trying to rebuild the nation's education and healthcare system, oversee the deactivization and reintegration of the old security forces and ex-combatants. I mean, they need a new police service. Who do you trust and who do you don't? And this is a very excruciating process, which the United States, of course, thank God, is helping them to do. They have got to decommission these ex-combatants and help restore its shattered economy in the midst of the worst global recession in decades. And because of the extensive damage done by Charles Taylor and the conflict, things that we take for granted, such as roads, police to protect residents, courts to convict criminals, a basic economy and confidence people have in this government have all got to be rebuilt. This is not a time to send President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf another whole slew of people to provide educational opportunities for jobs. It is shocking to go to Liberia, the poorest day I've ever had in my life, Congresswoman Fudge. I've never lived in a community that didn't have a library. And I went to Liberia, a place where they don't even have a library in major parts of Liberia. The challenges are many. They lack health care, education. They suffer from an unemployment rate of 80%. Yes, 80%. Lingering cultural and social effects from the legacy of war. And again, those haunting eyes of those child soldiers who have got to be reintegrated into society after experiencing or committing serious crimes. 76% of Liberians in 2006 lived on less than $1 per day. 52% live on less than 50 cents per day. 157 infants per 1,000 die before their first birthday. Over 1,000 mothers die per 100,000 live births. Most Liberians do not have access to safe drinking water. I was there in Liberia and I had a bottle of water. Kids came up to me fighting over the bottle of water. And I was very reluctant to give these children a bottle of water that I had drank from. And someone said to me, "Ma'am, that is the cleanest water that they will ever have, perhaps in their entire life, that is in that bottle." These are the conditions that they're living under. Electricity is sporadically available. The list goes on and on and on. And this is only an hour that we have here, Madam Chair. One tool that the president does have, though, is the economic support flowing into her country from Liberians here in our country, some because of the special protections granted to them by TPS and DED. With the Liberian economy struggling and a global economic recession not making things any easier, money being sent to a country from relatives living in the U.S. is a veritable lifeline. According to the Liberian government, remittances from the U.S. totaled $60 million in 2007, providing essential support. According to the International Monetary Fund, Liberia's 2 civil wars have reduced Liberia's real gross domestic product to about 40% of its pre-war level between 1989 and 2003. There's no magic wand available to President Sirleaf Johnson to restore 60% of GDP overnight. And again, it would be extremely egregious on our for us to return citizens to that country without the prerequisite infrastructure. She has also, I hope, the steadfast support of this Congress and this administration to Liberia and its people. A couple of years ago, she was right here in this chamber and addressed a joint session of Congress, an honor thrust upon this inspiring leader because of the historic connection and special relationship between our two countries. In that address, she said, and I quote, "The Liberian people are counting on me and my administration to create the conditions that will guarantee the realization of their dreams. We must not betray their trust. All the children I meet, when I ask what they want most, they say, I want to learn. I want to go to school. I want an education. We must not betray their trust." The transition from conflict to peace is never quick nor easy. And, Madam Chair, I am afraid for the future of Liberia if we do not provide them with adequate support. I'm going to amend my remarks and submit them for the record. But in closing, I just want to commend President Obama for his welcome step. He shares the strong belief that there's a beautiful democracy budding in Liberia. And I congratulate President Obama for his strong expression of support for our Liberia. The good thing about it is that this nation is just rich with natural resources, that we now have a leader with credibility in President Johnson Sirleaf. She is so decent as well as being brilliant, that this can help create tremendous wealth for its people. It now has this capable leader for its vision, and the diamonds and minerals and its port can all lead to great prosperity, and we should be proud to be their great friend. And with that, I yield back my time to you, and thank you again for your stewardship over this hour.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I would very much like to thank my friend and colleague, the gentlelady from Wisconsin, for her passion and her insight. At this time, I would now like to yield to the